as I was preparing for this, I looked back at a year ago, and I had a meeting on my calendar that said COVID, should we panic? That was the name of the meeting invite. I had just quit a job I actually worked with a few of you, and had started my own company and was 2 weeks into it when this started. And it's amazing to see where we are now, and things that felt unthinkable are now commonplace. And so we're going to talk about some of those things today, and maybe see what that transition's been like for everybody, and where it's going to lead to in the future. So before we get too much into that, if everybody let's start with Kristen, and just introduce yourself, where you're working, and we'll go from there, and then we'll jump into some of these questions.
My name is Kristen Makanoa, and I work as product manager at PDCflow. I work with development teams and sales, marketing, and customer-facing teams to continuously improve our product. And PDCflow is a customer engagement technology that lets companies request and receive compliant payments, contracts, documents, images, and that type of thing. And we're a completely remote-first company, and we collaborate on a daily basis.
Awesome. Cool. Nate, let's go to you.
Sure.
Well, there's two Nates. Nate Berry is who I was talking about.
Oh, so I just assumed you were talking. Sorry. Sorry, Nate.
That's all right.
It's all good.
I'm Nate Berry. I'm a senior UX researcher and designer. I work for SILAC Insurance Company. We do annuities. I'm mainly focusing right now on improving our internal tools and our websites, and in the future it will be consumer-facing products. So I've got a background in development, I've got a background as a product manager, and I've got a background on consumer-facing products. So it's an interesting shift to do internal tools, and to also do that remote is kind of an interesting thing. But been doing UX for a long time. Excited to be on the panel.
Awesome. Thanks. Let's jump to Andrew.
Hi, I'm Andrew Hancey. I'm a senior software engineer working for TransLoc. You're maybe more familiar with Ride Systems, is another company that we acquired recently. So we're in the public transit bus tracking sphere. So if you've used, like, for example, the Aggie Shuttle up around Utah State or at the University of Utah, and use the software there, we build the software and the infrastructure that helps support vehicle tracking, and as well as public transit for different municipalities across the country.
Cool. And then Nate, last but not least, sorry.
Hey, no. So I'm Nate Holman, and I work for Juniper Systems, which is a local company here to Logan. We do mobile data collection solutions, primarily ruggedized computers and software and sensors that go with that. We're a little bit unique, and we manufacture here in Logan in our facility. A lot of our competitors, or a lot of devices, are not manufactured here in the States anymore, but we do a lot of that here. I oversee sales and marketing for the company, which also includes product management, business development, tech support. And my background's actually, I'm a mechanical engineer. Started in engineering and moved into sales and marketing. So great to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for being on this panel. And thanks for being willing to share your experiences here. I'm going to ask each of you to think back a year ago to where you were and what's happening. And the first thing that I want to ask is just what's changed in your professional life from a year ago to now? And if you can just give us a brief summary. You may have changed jobs, you may have changed where you're working, you may have changed how you work. But I'm just overall curious, what's different from a year ago as the pandemic started to right now? And why don't we go in the same order that you introduced yourselves?
You bet. This global pandemic has affected everybody. Thinking back to a year ago, I was working on a team at Sentiva, and we were moved to a remote situation. It was a temporary change for the pandemic. And for me, that was really an enlightening experience. I didn't see myself as being able to work remotely as in an effective and efficient team. Just, frankly, a lapse of imagination, I suppose. Even as a creative person, I didn't see that being possible. But after making that temporary shift, I could see that it really does work for me personally. And also, I could be part of an effective team. and still collaborate, communicate, and focus and be efficient. So I decided to make a move and join an entirely remote team. So that was a big part of why I decided to make the change, because I can see a future past the pandemic, super excited for that to happen someday, where remote work really is even more efficient than it is today.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay.
Nate Barry, you're up.
Yep. So I was also at Sentiva, moved to a temporary remote position. So the thing about the position I was in, I worked with a lot of people in South Jordan, Utah, and I worked with a development team in Belarus. So a lot of what I was doing already was kind of remote collaboration, but I was also in the office, right? And it's kind of nice to be in the office to collaborate. But I moved to a remote position, and in the same way, being remote and having other companies remote allowed me to look at other opportunities. And I found another opportunity with a company in Salt Lake that had I had to commute, I wouldn't have even considered, right? So I was able to change jobs. You know, I'd been at Sentiva for 4.5 years. It was just time for a change. I was able to change. It was pretty seamless, to be honest. They've got a really good IT staff. Like, I think IT is kind of the hero of all this. And, you know, I went into the office, I got my laptop, came back, they gave me a setup, and I've been just rolling. I've been in the office twice. You know, I've been at that job for 6.5 months, been in the office twice, and it's only been to get my computer upgraded and to get my computer. But otherwise, it's been really nice. I mean, I miss in-person collaboration a lot. I miss pulling somebody into a room, because I'm a visual person as a UX designer. Whiteboard this real quick. I'm still working on that solution, and I've actually been playing around with a VR solution to try and do that, but we'll see. But so I do miss that just quick feedback loop, especially in UX. That's really important. But otherwise, I mean, everything's changed. Jobs changed. I'm fully remote. I'm, you know, use Teams a lot more, lots more meetings I'm finding. But otherwise, it's been a good change. I've actually appreciated being able to work remote.
Awesome.
Wow. A year ago, thinking about it, I was deep in the interview process, kind of like some other people had mentioned. I was also looking for a change and making a change in companies, and the interview process was unique, I think, for me. The typical have you on site and meet the team, meet and greets, and out to lunch with everybody and all that stuff. You know, it didn't really happen due to the safety of the pandemic and everyone involved. And so, yeah, it was an interesting change, but I think happened for the better for everyone involved. I hope. Yeah, it's crazy to think that's a year. I'm coming up on my 1-year anniversary at TransLoc. So crazy. Time flies, right?
Sure does.
Hey, me?
Yep, you're up.
So I'm a little bit different, I think, than the other panelists. I've been with the company for 18 years, so not a big change in my responsibilities. But a year ago, as a management team, we were having meetings like Blake mentioned of how are we going to manage this? Like I mentioned, we manufacture product here in Logan, and you can't manufacture product remotely. You have to have somebody physically there, and so for us, it was about identifying who needed to be in the building and who didn't, so that we could minimize how many people were there, and really make sure, number one, everybody was safe, and number two, that we could still produce product and generate revenue to pay bills and support all the families. So, that was a big thing we were focused on. I think Nathan said, our IT team was phenomenal. Within a few days, they had stuff up and running. We used Microsoft Teams, and that's been a really, really cool tool. I've really liked using that tool to be able to work and meet quickly with people. Previously, we used GoToMeeting, and that feels really cumbersome to use nowadays, and we've just pretty much stopped using it. But like Kristen mentioned, I hadn't really thought about working out of my home and wondered how I would personally do. And I was surprised how productive I was, at moments. Especially being in management, if you're at home, you don't have very many people walking past your office and popping in, asking questions. So the distractions were fewer, but I definitely missed out on some of those impromptu conversations that would happen. And I've been at the first few months, I was primarily, at home. A lot of our employees were, but come summertime when we had a better feel for things, we've been kind of a mix of in the office and at home. We really just left it up to the employee and their preference. We do have a number of employees that do prefer to be in the office versus at home. Home can be distracting if you've got a lot of little kids and different things going on. So there's some reason an office can be a benefit.
It's very true. I don't be surprised if I get distracted by little kids back here, and just how it works.
Yes.
So everybody had a little bit of a different experience. There were at least 3 of us that changed positions, and Nate, for you that didn't be able to chime in, I'm curious what onboarding has been like for those that went through it, or for those that you've hired during the pandemic, and how that's been different than other experiences that you've had. So why don't we start in the same order, just jump from Kristen, work our way down, and see how it goes.
Yeah, like many of the other people have mentioned, I haven't met a lot of my coworkers in person. I have met the 3 infrastructure team members, and they have been hugely helpful with getting my setup up and running. And you inevitably run into a few bumps along the way. So I think in terms of onboarding, that's been the biggest difference. The pain points or where you get stuck are basically IT. Aside from that, it's just we've had discussions as we've needed, both during the interview process and during onboarding. It's really nice to have a centralized communication method where where meetings are coming from. You use centralized tools is something that's really helped with the onboarding process. Everyone's using the same tech tools. We double down on them. We use the same ones for different types of communications. We are using GoTo, which is we've doubled down on that, but it's interesting to hear that some of the other tools work better for some of you on the panel. That's interesting. But that's been hugely helpful, having those centralized tools and just having conversations as needed and keeping schedules set up and jumping on to those calls as just whenever needed. It's been super simple from my perspective.
Awesome.
Yeah, so for me, it's been interesting because I'm the first UX hire. So I've had to remotely kind of establish business value for UX, establish kind of a case for UX, and also try and figure out how to work with product owners, how to work with the development team, how to work with business. So it was an interesting thing. The initial interview was really nice, went really smooth, got onboarded, got all my computer set up, got set up there, and then it's okay, now let me figure out what I can do with the organization to provide value for UX, right? So I kind of treated that as a UX project. I sent out a lot of surveys. We've got multiple development teams. I sent surveys out to each development team asking them, how do you want to work with UX? How do you see the UX development relationship happening? Took all that data and then met with all the different development managers. And it feels like it's a slower process than it would have been had I been in the office. But it's also forced me to really dig deep into certain things to make sure that I'm being effective as for now, hopefully it'll grow soon, but it's the sole UX person to multiple dev teams. I'm not a blocker, and also they're getting what they need out of me. So that's been interesting on the onboarding process and getting to know people. You definitely get to know people better if you have daily stand-ups with them or multiple meetings. And if there's people that you don't interact with on a daily basis, it's just really hard to get to know the company as a whole, to get to know the culture. That's another thing that I found is it feels like you find your niche and you kind of stay there. So it's an effort to get out of your bubble.
Yeah, for sure. My onboarding process was kind of similar. Equipment was typically shipped to my house, so I didn't really have an office or an IT department to go pick it up from. However, most of their tools are already remote friendly, so I was able to get the laptop and use credentials that were sent to me and get set up and get going and be productive day one. Being on a software development team, most collaboration tools are already digital. So most of your issue tracking like Jira is already in the cloud, in the browser. So you can already kind of get up to speed there. Code repositories are already up there, and have access. You can have access to them from your home. At TransLoc, we're in the Google Apps for Business. I guess that's what it's called now. Google Workplace. We're using Google Meet for a lot of our virtual meetings, and Drive for a lot of that document storage and collaboration there. So those barriers are low to kind of get that cross-team chatter and get that collaboration going. So yeah, I think, again, I had the luxury of kind of most of the tooling that I already use is digital. And so the one thing I guess I am really sad about missing out on was being able to get the whole team in a room together and build those relationships from day one. You can sit down around a conference table and you can whiteboard out the architecture of the application you're working on and really kind of pick up on the mannerisms and the body language that your team has. So that was lacking, but through events like this and daily stand-ups, you can kind of pick up on that and fill that in as you go and get to know everybody.
I guess I'll share, from my perspective, it's been on hiring, and, we have hired quite a few people in the last several months. Obviously not very many at the start of COVID because we didn't know what was happening. But I think we've done some remote interviews, but generally we've been, asking the applicant to come in to the office and try and do those in person if they're comfortable. If the other employees who are part of that interview process are comfortable. But we've got a nice new building that we moved into 2 years ago, and that's afforded us some good space, and we've got some larger conference rooms that we can come in and space out and meet in. But it's still challenging to interview someone in person with the mask on and not be able to read some of the facial expressions and kind of not know really what they look like. If I see them later on, I may not realize that that's who came to interview. But it seems like it's worked okay. We've tried, at least one employee I know, we asked them to maybe try and be in the office a little bit more to get to know some people, and they've commented that they appreciated that. They've had questions, and it's been pretty easy to ask someone else who's there real quick, rather than trying to look up or always just hit their manager. I can't imagine starting at a company during this, and you guys have alluded to some of those challenges. It would be really tough. But we've tried to do some activities remotely to kind of engage and get some interaction with some employees, but the participation rate's been a little bit on the low side on those. But I think generally the onboarding has gone fairly well. But I think that's because at our company, we're seeing a fairly good percentage of people in the office occasionally. So that's helped.
Awesome. I think all of you alluded to one of the problems or maybe challenges that comes with remoteness, and that's building relationships. What challenges have you found in there, and what have you found that works to try and build relationships with people that, or I guess maintain some of those relationships with people that you're no longer seeing in person every day? We can just go in the same order we've done before.
Okay. Someone wants to go first. For my part, I really think they're the same. A lot of the challenges are the same challenges, right? That we deal with as team members. Joining a new team, we always have that challenge. And that challenge remains as your team grows and changes. You're always needing to work on building those connections and those relationships. One thing that I found that works for us on a remote basis is having a combination of recurring meetings, regular recurring meetings, whether it's the daily stand-up with the development team or bi-weekly meetings with different different department teams, sales, marketing. That in combination with a really kind of like an open door policy on Slack, where we are really comfortable just pinging each other and saying, hey, can you jump on a call? So those combination of ad hoc and set meetings is really helpful to making those relationships happen. But again, I don't think that a lot of the things that we deal with remote are new. They have different clothes, but they're the same types of challenges that we'll deal with no matter where we work.
Yeah, and I think for me, I decided to be a little bit more proactive in how I reach out and who I reach out to, right? And just because you don't have that organic, let me just join a conversation. You know what I'm saying? So not being afraid to reach out, not being afraid to reach out to a dev manager and saying, hey, let's talk about UX. Give me your ideas. And each conversation has been maybe a little awkward at first, or maybe it's felt a little bit weird to reach out, but they've all been very productive. And I consider myself really lucky to work with people who are all trying to do the best they can. They're all super inviting. They're all super welcoming. And another thing that's helped, our HR team's great in the sense that they've done quarterly, everybody's on a Teams call or a Zoom call. They send out, like for Christmas, they send out gifts, they send out a game for everybody to play. So that's good for team building. And each development team for 1 hour a week does like a game. And I'm lucky enough to be able to join all three because I work with all three dev teams. So stuff like that really helps. But it's helped me a ton, get to know people, right? And that's a lot of what that is. I mean, you can see it as maybe the team just playing, but I think even more so remote, it's very important to give your teams the opportunity to just get together, play a game, and just get to, because that's not happening organically.
Very true. Those opportunities for team building are important. The challenges behind building relationships and maintaining those relationships is interesting. I think as both of you guys have really pointed out, you have to be super deliberate in communicating openly and often with the people you work with. And I've found that something that's just as simple as having a webcam on during your daily meetings, it brings a lot of empathy into these people you're working with. They're not just voices on the end of the line. They're people with lives and things going on. I think, that given the opportunity and given, keeping within moderation, having the chance to have non-work banter, getting to know who you work with all the time and likes and dislikes and finding some common interests, helps build those relationships and lets you relate to each other on a more than work level. And then, asking questions and not being scared. That was one of the things I had to overcome. No matter what I thought, if it was a silly question or I should already know the answer, ask it anyway. It keeps that channel of communication open, and it helps enforce that, you guys are a team and you're all working together, and hopefully you guys are together as the sum of your parts are greater than the whole. And, when one succeeds, everyone succeeds. So.
Cool. I think it's been interesting to see it really is employee dependent. You have some employees who may be a little more social, a little more extroverted. They engage just naturally, and I think those folks do really well. The ones that tend to kind of work as a silo, work by themselves, like to work alone. Those are the ones that we've had to, make sure there's a weekly call set up and try and make sure we're pulling them into conversation to make sure they're still engaged and part of the team and up to speed of what's going on. So I think I've seen some differences in just the employees. We've over over the summer, we got everyone together. I think just about everybody, and just met at a park. So it was outdoors where people could spread out, and that was kind of a nice event. It wasn't required, and made sure everybody felt like if you didn't feel comfortable, don't feel like you need to attend. But we had just about everybody come, and I know they really enjoyed that. So I'm hoping that with the warmer weather, we can have some more opportunity to do that. And so that might be an idea for some of you. Trying to think of what other thoughts around that topic. I think I just echo a lot of what you all have already said.
Awesome. Well, we had somebody comment in the chat. I don't know if each of you can see that, but a question that was kind of along those lines is, as a new employee, what things can you proactively do to try and make sure that you're building those relationships and fitting into the culture? And as some of you are or have been new employees, I figure it's a good way to answer it. And Nate, kind of in that management position, if you've seen new people come on, to see kind of some of the things they've proactively done. I think even though there may be some overlap to the previous question, I think this is still good to address, because I think if in the future, with remote work being more and more of a thing, there's a good chance almost everybody has to deal with this problem. And so let's it a little bit and see, maybe think back of where you were, or if you were in this position, what things would you proactively do to try and build those relationships now that maybe you didn't do or wish you had done more of?
Yeah, maybe I'll let Kristen off the hook. I'll go first. How's that?
Do it. Let's do reverse order. That'd be great.
Yeah. It's just of a couple of things recently. We have a weekly department meeting, and we do a warm up that's assigned to each employee. They get a chance to just share a new idea or something they learned or something that would benefit the group. And this last week, our event coordinator, she had a great idea. She reached out to a few of the employees and had them answer a question, just a personal question about themselves. Where do you like to go on vacation, or what's your favorite color, something like that. And so that was kind of the warm up. Was just, I think there was 10 or 11 of the employees that just shared a little bit about themselves right at the start of our meeting. And I really liked it. I thought it was a great idea, and something I think you could do, in a department meeting like that. Just give everyone a chance to get to know each other at that personal level. I've also noticed with these remote meetings, they start right on time. If you're a minute late, you're late. And that didn't used to be the case in person. So you really it feels like you're just getting right to business. And I think you have to purposefully, if you're in charge of that meeting, and it's sometimes hard to do, but just sort of relax and say, I'm going to let us just chat a little bit before we get into it, even though it feels like, okay, everyone's here, let's go. That probably has to be a purposeful thought to allow.
Yeah, I think definitely. Some advice I'd give to someone being a new employee recently. I think you have to don't be scared to put yourself out there a little bit. I mean, be willing to be just a little vulnerable and showing that you're a human too. And maybe even on days that I don't know, a bad hair day or whatever, be willing to still have your webcam on anyway, and be willing to show different sides of you. And yeah, hopefully you guys on this team have the same objective, and that's to succeed at your jobs. And so, yeah, at the very least, you have that common ground that you can start from. And I loved those icebreaker ideas, those warm-up ideas. That's a perfect conversation starter to help kind of break that ice a little bit and get some conversation going and help encourage more people out of their shell a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, to echo both, it's put yourself out there. One thing that I did, if I were in a physical office and there's things going on either after work or there's everybody's going to go play games or something, I would always just duck out, because I had my interaction. But I made a conscious effort to join some Jackbox games at like 5:30 that a committee had put together, and that was super helpful. It was way out of character for me, but just making the decision to go join that game, I got to know people outside of work. It's still virtual, but it's outside of work, and just to unwind with them and to get that communications cadence, to find out things about them that you may not have known previously, and to be able to talk to them as more on a more personal level, even in meetings and stuff like that.
Yeah, great advice. I'm just going to underscore a couple of things that came up because I think they're the most important aspect of meeting new people. And this is another case where this isn't different than when you're in person, but you do have to make really intentional efforts to ask the question that might be dumb. It's okay, ask those questions. And for one, you're getting the answers to the questions. And for two, you're creating a connection. So I think think about the shift when you're working remote or working from home, shift your default from not asking to asking. Shift your default from not reaching out to starting a conversation. Whether it's a text conversation or a call, put your default to reaching out and making those conversations happen. And you'll start seeing that people will return those types of communications back to you. So if you invest in that early on with your new team, that will start to pay off in the long run.
Awesome. You know, I was thinking about this as you were answering, and Nate, you kind of alluded to it with the fact that meetings start on time. I have a meeting that I have to attend every once in a while, and I will be the first person to give an update. And if I'm not on time, they'll just move on. My update will be gone, and I won't get a chance. But the interesting thing of meetings starting on time, and they also tend to fairly end on time, and there's not a lot of chit chat in the meetings a lot of times, partly because it's hard to talk over people and organically carry on conversations when you have a big group remotely. But one of the things I found is that there's more like physical hours of work being done remote than there was in person, which also has led, at least personally, to me getting closer to burnout. And so I'm curious for all of you, what have you done to be able to still balance a work-life balance when those kind of hard lines of work and life have gotten a bit more blurred lately? Where, when you're there and you have kids around you and you're in your house, it's harder to balance that. What have you done to keep those things balanced? And let's do reverse order still. Let's start with Nate down at the bottom and we'll move through.
Sure. I don't know if I'm going to be a good one to answer. I felt like I've been able to keep that work-life balance pretty well. I think, I tend to be one where I can focus and block out what's going on around me fairly well. My wife, doesn't like that all the time, but it is. It does feel like your workday is a little bit blended. There's some benefit to that. Maybe it's nice in the middle of the day to take a break and go mow the lawn. That could be a healthy thing, and let your brain kind of reset, where previously it was just trying to just hammer through it. So I found that being able to have the flexibility of being at home sometimes and in the office sometimes, I can kind of manage my productivity so I can be in the place where I can be most productive. And that's helped make sure those days don't need to get long because I'm still effective and can get things done.
I've found this adjustment to remote work life. We spend a lot of time in front of screens all day long. That's our job. So having a hobby or having some other activity that doesn't involve a screen has been good for my mental health. I also strive on trying to get outdoors as much as I can. You can kind of see the window and the shine of the window being open over there because it does so much for your overall attitude and perspective on life and having some time outdoors. And that's definitely helped me. Another thing is, my kids are home upstairs and you can take the breaks when you need to. And and I can go off and I can spend 10 minutes of playtime during tea time or dress up time or whatever, and just get that break and from work for a few minutes and let the subconscious do its thing so that I can come back refreshed and come back to the task at hand. And it happens so many times. You come back and you say, oh, right, that's what I need. That's how I need to solve this. This is what I need to do next. So those are just a couple things I've found have helped me.
Great.
Yeah. So for me, I try to take at least a brisk walk every morning, right? Even if it's freezing, I bundle up, I get out, before the workday. I take my walk. Sometimes I'll call a friend and have a in-person, over the phone conversation that isn't about work, kind of reset my brain. And then another thing that I've found that's been helpful, I like to do music. So I set up a music workstation in my office at home here where I've got some drums and I've got a little workstation that I can play. And I'll take 15 minutes and I'll kind of schedule it and I'll go play the drums 15 minutes. And to your point, Andrew, it cleanses your mental palate, right? And I really like the fact that I can do that from home. And that also leads to progress in other areas of your life. But you can balance your work with your hobbies, with your family, and it's good to context switch in that case, right? So that's one thing that I've kind of appreciated, is that if I'm just burned out, I can take that break and I can do something that'll help, and then I can get back to it, right?
Yeah, the best work from home situations are definitely those that let individuals balance and have the tools to be effective and contribute to the team's success, while also letting them have the flexibility to deal with unpaid work that constrain them, So I think I appreciate a couple of you pointed out, like mowing the lawn or doing stuff with the kids, like things that have to be done. In terms of balance from working from home, I think in a way, I see that as a huge perk, maybe one of the biggest perks of companies offering work from home and remote situations, that flexibility that they can offer families, and then therefore that let individuals make those decisions about how to make balance, right? So like I'm spooling this up to a bigger picture, thinking if tech companies are really, really interested in attracting and retaining female talent, then this is a great way to do that. So offering remote work and work from home situations lets the individuals make the decision about how to manage their lives.
Great. Thank you for each of the answers. They're really interesting, and the different perspectives are really helpful. We don't have a ton of time left, but I want to think a little bit about the future, right? There's a good chance that or at least hopefully, some of the concerns with the pandemic are winding down, and there's a good chance groups are going to gather more in congregate settings, back in offices or be back there. And this comes a little bit from Pete in the chat of sharing to it, but I'm curious on each of your thoughts about what going back to the office means, and if it will be more of a remote, if there'll be hybrid, maybe some suggestions on what to do if there's people that are uncomfortable coming back to the office. And how to manage that, especially there's an interesting thing that I've discovered with remote employees. When everybody's remote, there's less conversations that happen without them. But when you have a partially remote workforce, it's easy to exclude them. I realize I'm asking like 4 things in the same question, but I'm curious about what concerns you have going back to the office and what advice you may have for groups that are getting back into it. And I actually want to start with Nate Holman, because you guys have gone some of this already. And so I figured it's a good place for us to start.
Sure. I think it's just been natural. Like we haven't required it. It's just we've let it be up to the employee. We've started to have some discussions as a management team, and definitely the landscape's changed. And to compete as an employer, that's changed. We need to be able to be at least on a level playing field, and this is going to be a benefit that I think is offered, to just about every company. So, our thoughts have been around really letting it be an employee and supervisor discussion, and what's the nature of the job. Are there aspects that require them to be in the office? And again, like I said, we're a manufacturing company, so there are some roles that do require that. Some of it's all the time, some part of the time. And so we really just want to leave it, up to the supervisor's discretion, what makes sense. And, I think that there could be a few, like Pete mentioned here, I think there could be a few challenging situations where, there could be a full-time remote work situation. And that employee wants that to be the case. But as a supervisor, you're worried about them, distancing themselves from the rest of the group. And now there's extra effort on the part of the supervisor to make sure they're pulled in. So that's a burden on the supervisor. And then I think, like, you made a good point about, if you got some remote and some not, do you start excluding some of those? I think that's a really valid concern that needs to be considered and paid attention to. And I don't know if I have an answer for that. But I do think a hybrid can work really well if you do have a lot of people that live locally. It also opens up the talent pool, having the technology in place to work remote, to look at employees, potential good employees that don't live in the area. That also means our employees are at risk of being away by somebody else. So there's a lot of things to come into play, from a management standpoint and how to move forward.
Awesome.
I think,
Andrew, thanks.
Yes. I think you have to, I had a second ago. So managing, remote work going forward and how to include everybody. I think if you're going to go to the effort to make a meeting and get people face to face, you've got to make sure it's worth having and make sure understanding that everybody's time is valuable. And surely you're having a meeting when an email doesn't suffice. And it's done on such a team by team basis, right? I think you have to be willing to try things out and see what works, see what doesn't, and adjust from there. If it doesn't work for your team and you're finding that balance between getting everyone in the know versus getting work done, that's a challenge to overcome on each team. So, don't be scared to see what works and see what doesn't and try something new.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with it's team by team and almost individual by individual as well, right? Because there's a lot of people on the employee level that are taking remote positions that there's a little bit of vulnerability in there, right? So for me personally, I took a remote position for a company. They're downtown Salt Lake, but if I had to do that commute every day, I probably wouldn't have taken the job because that's a ridiculous, especially in the wintertime, right? Going from Logan to Salt Lake. So there's there, if they do start pulling back into the office, that I'll feel, right? And luckily I have remote in my job description. Like, I am a remote employee, and I appreciate the fact that they did that because it removes some of that vulnerability. But I could see some people feeling that moving forward. They've got their job, but it's in Denver. And suddenly everything's good. They go back, they realize that they like the in-person a little bit better. Where does that leave that person who's made their life remote, right? So I think that's going to become a challenge as well. And again, I do think it's on an individual basis. To your point, Nate, individual on a team basis and an individual on a personal basis for you.
I'm going to put an idea out there and bear with me, walk with me through it. So I think that with today's technology and today's environment, it's rather than asking if a certain team or an individual can work remotely, it's asking how the entire team can move to remote. Because I've been speaking with different customers, different business owners in really highly regulated industries like accounts collections and medical billing, and these companies pre-pandemic would not have thought. They would not have thought it would even be possible for them to be remote companies. But today they are. They've been able to move to remote, and it's with different tech tools like, like PDCflow that enables compliant payments, and that type of options is one of the pieces of their tech solution. But there are just so many tools available that really make it possible for teams to be successful remotely. The other thing is when it's just part of the team being remote, is that, in a way, if from my opinion, now we get really into my personal opinion, I think that breaks the consistency. So the teamwork and the consistency and the, hey, we're all in this together, we're all 100% on the same page, I think that makes that piece really, really challenging. So just a concept to put out there to consider.
Great. Thank you all for your perspectives. We've got about 10 minutes. We were trying to wrap it up in about 10 minutes, but we've had two great questions that I want to touch on that are in the chat box over there. And also just for the attendees, if you want a question answered, now's your chance to throw it in the chat before we wrap up. But I want to get to the first one. We have a question from Sophie, and she asks, how has technology and the using of new applications made it easier to do remote? And what, if you do end up going back to an office, what of those technology pieces will you still use, even though you aren't particularly remote? So if you can keep these a little bit short so we can get through some of these, that'd be great. Let's start with Kristen.
One thing I just realized during this conversation and hearing those of you who have answered, like, how are you communicating? One thing I realized is almost all of our communications are through Slack or calls. So video calls or Slack. We're not using emails hardly at all internally. And that, I think, is a really good replacement of all the in-person conversations. And maybe that's why for our team or for me, I haven't felt as much duress without the water cooler conversations. I don't know that I would take that back, but it's kind of a realization of how powerful that particular tool is at making conversation so easy. So Slack's been even better than when I was in the office.
Yeah, so for me, everything would stay the same. I would just be sitting at a different desk, to be honest with you. Like, I use Figma for design, which is real time. I use Jira, I use Teams, we do video calls. So my day-to-day would not change one bit. I would just be having in-person conversations versus video conversations, but I wouldn't dump anything, I wouldn't change anything, it'd all stay the same.
Same here. We too rely on Slack pretty heavily in that rapid response. If we do need more than Teams, like a phone call or a screen share, we will fire up a Google Meet and do some of that. But Jira's already up there, Slack's there, and Drive, Docs, Meet does the video conferencing portion. My job also is remote, so even if I was like Nate, if I wasn't sitting here, I would be in an office somewhere else talking to the same people that would be across the country. So not much change for me either.
I mentioned earlier, we started using Teams, and I think there's been a lot of benefit to using that tool. So I see us continue to use that for things. I see every meeting kind of set up where you could have, if people are in the building, they can get together, but also those who are not can remote in. So in the past, we had to identify if somebody wasn't present and set up a GoToMeeting. Now it's just every meeting, you could do both. Our conference rooms are set up to be able to handle that. So there's definitely a lot of technology that's put in place that I think we're going to continue to use going forward.
Awesome. Thank you all for that. The next question is from Travis, and he asks, how do we maintain fairness when promoting individuals if on-site employees are more visible and potentially more likely to receive promotions? This is a great question. I also have a caveat that Travis and I work together, so maybe he's just fishing for a promotion here, as I haven't seen him in person very much. I'm just kidding. It's a great question, and I'm curious. Let's start at Kristen and work our way down.
Actually, I don't have a direct answer to that, because I think that touches on why it's so difficult to have split teams. And I would be very hesitant to in how a split team approaches that type of thing. HR reviews, performance, hiring, this and that. Historically, women who ask for more flexible hours are put at a disadvantage. That's just shown in data and that type of thing. So that would be a red flag for me too, Travis. I think it's a really good question. And I don't necessarily know that we know the answer, but we'll see if we have good ideas.
Yeah, and I think it is up to the organization to create a culture that doesn't promote based on FaceTime. I know that's hard to say, and I know that's like an ideal world, but if you're working for an organization where the only way you can get a promotion is if you have FaceTime with your boss, then honestly, you're at the wrong organization. And that's very broad, right? But it's really up from top down to make sure that they put measures into place that doesn't reward the people that are able to be on site versus the people that are off site through reviews, through who knows exactly. I don't have the answers on how to do that, but it is an organization thing. And I honestly think that if we do continue in a hybrid model, the organizations that do promote based on FaceTime, those are the organizations that will be left behind, because a lot of the talent that wants to stay remote will stay remote. You know, and there's a lot of good talent that's just going to stay remote because they can go wherever they want to, and you'll miss out on that talent in a big.
Yeah, and I would hope that organizations can kind of take a holistic and objective approach to doing those kinds of promotions, and having, a certain set of criteria that to make sure individuals are operating at that level. Again, I'm not sure I really have much more to add to this question than that. Sorry.
And my first thought was, really it should be based on performance. That's what it should be. And I think that's what we've tried to do at Juniper. I was trying to think back, as a manager, have I ever considered or been biased by the visibility of an individual? And I don't think I have. I hope I haven't, because I really do believe that performance is what is important when looking at promotions.
Awesome. Well, it's a tough question, and it's something I think all of us will have to deal with and be in organizations that we deal with going forward. And so, Travis, thank you for asking it. As we wrap up here, I wanted to try and end on a more lighthearted note. And if I may share one of my own embarrassments, I'm going to ask each of you to maybe share your most embarrassing video call moment over the last year. However good or bad they may be, hopefully they're not too embarrassing. But since I'm asking, I'll start. I'm the CEO of a small company called Pulse for Good, and we sell stuff to nonprofits. And so I had a call with the Rockefeller Foundation. It's one of the largest foundations in the country. I'm on with the CEO. We're going through a presentation. I'm sharing my screen, so I'm not really seeing what my own video is like. And she starts kind of laughing, and I don't know what's happening. She's like, "Sorry, your daughter's dancing in the background." And so I have noise canceling headphones on, had no idea there's a bed behind me, and my daughter's just up like doing twirls and things in the background there. Ended up being great, like it was super fine, but it was definitely embarrassing. I'm curious if any of you have had embarrassing moments like that with video calls.
So, go ahead,
yeah,
sorry.
You go. No.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, mine's the same. I think people with young kids, right? Like, and I don't know if it's embarrassing. I think people need to give, and I think people have been really good about it, but like, you're home, you've got kids, life happens. Like, our son gets home from school and he just likes to wear shorts. So he takes everything off, puts his shorts on. And I was in a meeting and he was standing right here, shirtless, just staring at the meeting. And I had no idea. And people were laughing. And I looked over. I'm like, "Oh, hey, buddy, why don't you go? Why don't you go do something?" That happening a lot. And I think that it's also good because it gives you a look into another human being. You know what I'm saying? It gives people a human.
Obviously, had one to share. I'm dying to share. It's a piece of advice, really. If you ever think that a show and tell on Zoom is a good idea, just take my word for it. It's not. My cat and I are both still recovering from that pet show and tell. So just don't go there. Find something else.
That's awesome.
I had a kid one. The door behind me, usually if my wife needs something, she'll she'll just slowly open it to see if I'm on a call or not. And I was on a call with the board of directors, and I saw the door behind me kind of creak open. So I thought it was her, but I was in a conversation. And then I kind of noticed this little blonde head, and I thought she was crawling on the floor to go to get out of the closet. But it turned out to be my 2-year-old that just found his way downstairs, and I just put him on my lap and we just kept going. But you know, like everyone said, I think that's the fun thing about this. You get to experience and see people, you know, in their personal life, and I think that builds some connections and some empathy. So it's been fun.
Definitely. I've definitely had some meetings where my office door is typically closed, but you hear some very loud pounding coming from 3 children all pounding on the door at the same time to try and come in and say hello, since they just got home from preschool or first grade or what have you. So they just want you part of their lives and want to be included in whatever you're doing, regardless what it is. So.
Great. Well, thank you all for sharing those. Thank you for sharing your expertise and your experience, and thank you for being part of this tech community here in Logan. You know, I think one of the things that the remoteness has done is weirdly invited us to bring more of our whole selves, family, pets included, to be part of this equation. And the truth of the matter is the problems that matter in society require all of us, not just the parts that sometimes we want to show. And so thank you. Thanks for taking time today. And for everybody attending, thanks for coming. And hopefully you're able to join the next one that we do